Your Excellency, thanks so much indeed for your time. Great to see you again, and thank you very much indeed for finding time during your busy schedule to speak to us on what is a topic very personal to you and important to so many. Last year, you don't need me to tell you, sir, the world was ravaged by a global pandemic. We are still in the midst of that pandemic, dealing with it, which has left no city, no region untouched. This year, however, 2021, we've seen some of the world's worst fires, wildfires, and floods in living memory in different parts of the world, America, Europe, China, amongst others. It seems to me that the need for global coordination to tackle climate change and protect the nature has never been greater. And if that is the case, sir, how hopeful are you and your team about the current situation and why?
First, I should thank you very much for making it this morning and taking me for this important topic. The pandemic have shown us a great lesson to learn. The pandemic made it so difficult for life to go on initially, and then when efforts put together, we have seen great synergy between governments, between people, between entities, international organizations. They put their head together, efforts together, and they made life a little bit easier than what it used to be. So that is something where we really capitalize on for the climate change and the impact of the climate change. If we are right in our track today in agreeing that the efforts, the collective efforts of the governments and the international organizations were put together, we would be safe at the end of the tunnel. The report so far that we receive from the United Nations IPCC report is not very much promising because they look into Paris Agreement and their SDGs in specific. Nonetheless, the lesson learned from the COVID-19 pandemic has not been factored in this report, unfortunately. So when the results of the collective efforts is factored in the next report that would probably come in 5 years' time, would definitely see a good improvement. Today, almost all countries are putting their efforts together. By pooling in the United States within the theme of climate change, things have changed. Most of the countries now have agreed on a timetable where net zero is being discussed. Climate projects have been looked into. Sustainability is being also seen. Neutrality of carbon is also being looked at. So now the climate is actually flourishing, let's say. Now, how hopeful I am? To be frank, I am very much hopeful. What we have seen through the pandemic gave us a good lead to be hopeful. What we've seen today, particularly while we are rallying toward COP26, we've seen general agreements in most countries that we only have one planet and we really have to deal with it right. We are not talking about the next generation. We are talking about the generation that exists that would actually be affected. The effects of climate change, we see it today from the fire that we're facing, that you have actually spoken about. So it is very essential to know that the future, I don't want to say bright, but it's very close to be bright, because it's always the case when people, governments, organizations put their efforts together. No pandemic, no climate change can beat them.
We've looked to the future. I might ask you to now look to the present and partly to the past. You mentioned sustainability and the all-important SDGs that the world are working towards. Tell us more, if you can, about the journey, a personal journey for you and, of course, the country that you so notably and wonderfully serve, the UAE. How's the journey been over the last decade for the United Arab Emirates with regard specifically to sustainability and building, as you quite rightly say, those all-important partnerships to achieving the goals?
To be frank, our journey in the United Arab Emirates is nothing short of remarkable, tremendous. We have picked up the effect of the environment good 25 years ago. And we have thought in plans, strategies, how do we locally deal with our local environment, let's say. What are the projects needed to reduce the dependent on fossil fuel? What are the projects needed to go into leading the future? So what we've done during the last decade or so is really great. So many projects has been completed. We've seen, if we just compare numbers, 10 years ago we had about 10 megawatts of clean energy. Today we have over 2,400 megawatts. And that shows how serious the government of United Arab Emirates in tackling the climate change, and how serious the private sector in the United Arab Emirates also in assisting the government in dealing with the sustainability. Today, any government think that they can do it alone. I think they would actually face the biggest failure in history. You can only face it by two things: working with others, and also depending on private entities and the private sector who share the risk with you, and he would be willing to really participate in pushing sustainability and climate change requirement for the future. So what we have today, we have probably the United Arab Emirates, as you know, is the country with in the Arab world with a nuclear plant that would actually be subsidizing the future dependent on fossil fuel, with the capacity that would actually double that we have. It would actually represent about 25% of our requirement in the future. So we really went so far in dealing with projects, particularly on sustainability, in clean energy, in green environment. So these are projects that are very much apparent. The Mohammed bin Rashid Park in Dubai is one of the probably the biggest solar park in the globe. So we know what we are facing, and now and I feel that this is very essential. If you really want to lead, you really need to know what you're doing. And if you really want to know, if you want to lead, you really have to demonstrate that what you're doing is nothing short than making sure that you understand the future better than others. Otherwise, everyone would actually assume his duty as normal. But if you're leading, your duty is not normal; it's abnormal.
Yeah, no, it's extraordinary insight. Let's talk COP28 if we can, because no secret of the fact that the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, has offered to host COP28 in a couple of years' time. Just interested to find out from somebody who was obviously involved in that offer, what prompted this offer, and what would you and your team like to achieve at the event for the UAE?
COP28 is actually, we want to demonstrate our commitment to the universe, that we are committed. When we signed 2015 the Paris Agreement, we knew back then what it takes to be committed to the environment. That is one thing that we have to show outside the local environment. The second is the leadership requirements. If you really need to lead the region, you really need to have such event demonstrating your interest. The third, that we have a previous records of hosting similar events in Abu Dhabi. We hosted last year, beginning of this year, the dialogue of the region. Many ministers associated with the climate have been here. 2019, we also have hosted the Abu Dhabi climate change. So we have that experience to deal with events of this nature. So we thought showing the commitment and knowing what to do is something that we really need to show the world, that such commitment comes from experience. That this also comes from the need to demonstrate the leadership of the United Arab Emirates, particularly on this file.
I'm glad you've mentioned leadership there, because I wanted to wrap up with my final question about leadership and what you're talking about there, setting examples. I think it's fair to say that we're seeing a growing number of business leaders, institutions responding to the environmental crisis and the Paris Agreement in particular that you mentioned, setting more ambitious targets for themselves, for their business, for their individual outlets. And if you don't mind me saying, I think what matters globally for us and for what we're trying to achieve is all about hearing those leaders, those business leaders talk about the challenges different industries are facing in meeting the SDGs as they are set out. So my final question to you, sir, is what's your message? What is your message to business leaders out there around the world and those coming to the UAE and also those in the UAE when it comes to sustainability and when it comes to those all-important three letters, SDG?
Probably it's a wrap of what we have discussed earlier. Despite the initiatives that the government actually have launched and the initiatives that the government would actually launching in the future, it is very essential to pull in the private sector within your efforts. So that is one thing that we are seeing. We are not excited by it, but we've seen many private organizations talk about sustainability in their agendas. They have it within their portfolios. Many others talking about net positive carbon also are looking into pooling in their efforts. So I think we are at a stage where Paris Agreement is an umbrella that almost everybody is coming under. And the SDGs are respected by almost all the countries, with no exceptions. Some of them are ahead of others, yes, due to the fact that maybe they're able in doing it at this time. Probably their capability also are in the stake. So we really we have seen so far a global agreement on the SDGs. Almost all countries have made their commitment, right? Almost all of them. At some point, we were scared that the global challenges would probably be more than what we anticipated, simply because the United States was not within the commitment. But once we've seen the efforts, the international efforts, and the leadership of the almost all the countries, we feel safe to assume that we are in the right track, and we will be tackling SDGs, and we would also be at the end of the tunnel. We would be seeing a better environment, really speaking.
Fascinating times and so much to look forward to. Your Excellency, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much indeed for taking time to speak to us, and thanks so much indeed for explaining in so much detail your visions and the visions of, of course, the UAE.